Good afternoon, everyone, and good evening and good morning for all those who are joining us from different parts of the world, from different time zones. Welcome to this very special event, celebrating the International Day of Awareness on Food Loss and Waste, jointly organized by SNV, Netherlands Development Organization, the University of Nairobi, Society of Crop Agribusiness Advisors, SOCA, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, FAO, and the Government of Kenya. My name is Brenda Mareri. I'm a Food Nutrition Security Advisor at SNV, and I will be moderating this event. Thank you for those who are following this event live on the Farm Kenya YouTube channel, Facebook, and Twitter, and for those watching this recording. Follow the conversation on Twitter with the hashtag FLW, which is Food Loss and Waste. Kindly submit your questions and comments on the Q&A section of this Zoom webinar. A link to a Mentimeter is also going to be placed in the chat box, which you can access to feed in your expectations and provide views on food loss and waste. This event is being celebrated following the 74th United Nations General Assembly, designating the 29th of September as the International Day of Awareness of Food Loss and Waste. This is in a bid to recognize the fundamental role that sustainable food production plays in promoting food security and nutrition. Indeed, observance of this day globally marks a clear call to action for all the stakeholders in both the public and the private sector to bolster efforts to reduce food loss and waste. So we thank all of you who've been able to log into this webinar today to celebrate the International Awareness Day of Food Loss and Waste. And to set the stage, we'll be playing a pre-recorded message from the FAO Chief Economist, Maximo Torero, to highlight the importance of this day. So we'll take 5 minutes to listen to this pre-recorded message and to really understand why this day has been designated to celebrate food loss and waste. So without much ado, let's listen to this recording from the FAO Chief Economist, Maximo Torero.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's my great pleasure to convey greetings from the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, FAO, on the occasion of the inaugural observance of the International Day of Food Awareness of Food Loss and Waste. On 19th of December 2019, the United Nations General Assembly adopted the resolution proclaiming the International Day of Awareness of Food Loss and Waste to raise awareness of the importance of the problem and its possible solutions at all levels in a bid to promote global efforts and collective action towards meeting Target 12.3 of the Sustainable Development Goals. SDG 12.3 calls for halving per capita global food waste at retail and consumer levels and reducing food losses along production and supply chains, including post-harvest losses, by 2030. Observance of the International Day of Awareness of Food Loss and Waste on the 29th of September each year provide us an opportunity to reflect and to take stock of actions needed to stem the problem towards enhancing the sustainability and efficiency of our food systems and achieving SDG Target 12.3. Significant quantities of food produced today across the globe are lost and wasted along the supply chain and never make it to the mouth of consumers. Food loss and waste is also one of the most challenging contradictions of our time. An estimated 690 million people on our planet today are hungry and 3 billion people cannot afford a healthy diet. But at the same time, an estimating 14% of the food value at an estimated $400 billion is lost between harvest and distribution at the global level. What a contradiction. From a nutritional point of view, this loss is equivalent to an estimated 13% of calories produced globally that will never make it to the mouth of consumers, while many remain food insecure. In terms of greenhouse gas emissions, the food loss is associated with around 1.5 gigatons of CO2 equivalent. From a nutritional point of view, this is equivalent to more than 1,000 trillion milligrams of phosphorus and more than 350 trillion milligrams of magnesium. Food loss and waste represents a waste of significant and scarce resources used to produce food, including water, soil, energy, labor, and time. Clearly, a lot needs to be done to address the significant inequities and the high levels of food loss and waste that reduce the efficiency and the sustainability of our food systems. This is needed now, more than ever, as we continue to face the COVID-19 pandemic with increasing levels of food security in all regions of the globe. By preventing food loss and waste, we can save nutritious food for redistribution to those in need, avoid pressure on scarce natural resources, help mitigate climate change, and save money for farmers, companies, and households. So what actions will move us in the right direction to do so? Food loss and waste reduction must be a shared responsibility of all of us. We need to raise awareness of stakeholders and all levels of public sector, private sector, civil society, and consumers to help stem the problem. More and better statistical data covering where and how food losses and waste occur is required. Actions to address the specific sources of food loss and food waste must be scaled up, and collaboration must be promoted for greater coherence and effectiveness of action. Developments are required in the policy agenda, and incentives are required to promote investments in order to allow these changes to take place at an accelerated and expanded rate. Knowledge sharing through platforms such as the recently launched FAO Technical Platform on Food Loss and Waste Reduction will also contribute to the pace of the change. Reducing food loss and waste is a critical part of the transformation we need to improve the health of people and of the planet. This is why the International Day of Awareness of Food Loss and Waste is so important for FAO and for all of us. Let us use this opportunity to inform, educate, and engage consumers, youth, producers, parliamentarians with information about the importance of food loss and waste reduction. This needs to start at the family level, educating our children to respect and to appreciate food. By reducing food loss and waste, we can contribute to supporting food systems that protect the planet and efficiently deliver safe, nutritious, and diverse foods for all. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for that message from Mr. Maximo Terrero. Indeed, food loss and waste is a shared responsibility, and we all have a stake as stakeholders to ensure that we address food loss and waste. We have a very exciting lineup for you today, and without much ado, I would like to invite the Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of Agriculture, Livestock and Fisheries in Kenya, Professor Hamadi Borga, to join us and give us his opening statements to represent what Kenya is doing within the food loss and waste space. Karibu. Welcome, Professor Hamadi Borga.
Thank you very much for this opportunity to share some reflections from the Ministry of Agriculture about this very topical issue. As you are aware, when His Excellency the President was re-elected for the second term, he came up with the Big Four agenda. And the Big Four agenda is basically 100% food and nutrition security, of course, manufacturing, universal healthcare, and affordable housing. We in the Ministry of Agriculture, we pride ourselves of the fact that this Big Four agenda can be tackled wholesome from the Ministry of Agriculture, because we grow the food and make it available. It contributes to universal health because of the nutrition element, and we also support the manufacturing and agro-processing sector. Most of our industry are agro-based, and finally the income that we get from agriculture, because it contributes to about 34% of the GDP, also contributes to building houses. I know many farmers, when they get well paid, they will go and build a house and secure their families. So we are proud of the fact that the backbone of this economy is still agriculture at 57%, together with the logistics and other services that are supporting the agricultural sector. So agriculture is a big deal. Of course, we have a few challenges which resonate with the topic at hand today. We are using more land to produce more food. And this is not good for the environment, it's not good for the soil, and it's not sustainable in the long term. And the reason why we are we want to push to produce more land, more food on expansive land, contributing to greenhouse emissions, is because we lose about 15 to 30% of our food after harvesting. So post-harvest losses contribute to about 15 to 30%, including the wastage that the colleague from FAO has talked about. And in the Big Four agenda, among our targets is to cut down on this food waste and food losses, which are happening post-harvest, from on average 15 to 12% down to about 6%, so that we can make more food available and make the food accessible for the consumers. And this is a major target of our interventions within the Ministry of Agriculture, working with the different stakeholders. So that is one issue that I needed to put out there. The other thing is that we are second only to Nigeria as far as the cost of food is concerned as a proportion of the budget. We spend 45% of our household budgets buying food. That means our food is expensive, and largely food losses and food waste contribute to this, because if you lose anywhere between 15 and 30%, the figure for 30% is from some of the most perishable products, then you realize that it could be cheaper. And because we want to secure the goal of 100% food and nutrition security, then any interventions with the stakeholders along the value chains to minimize food losses is necessary for us to reduce the cost of food and to cut on wastage and all the negative things that come with the post-harvest losses and wastage of this very precious commodity. 10% of Kenyans, especially in the ASAL areas, are food insecure. This is about 10 million, about 5 million Kenyans are food insecure. And there is about 1.5 to 2 million who are chronically food insecure. And so it's an irony, because here in some of the food surplus areas, you have wastage, while in the food insecure areas, you have pain and hunger, and of course the cost of food in some of those areas is very high. So our focus on making sure that we reduce post-harvest losses and cut them down will contribute to also managing the food insecure population. The target which we have been given in the Big Four agenda is to cut that by half, from 10% to 5% by 2022. And we are tracking that to make sure that we achieve it. And any measures that we put to reduce the food losses are getting us closer to that. Now, we came up with a strategy to implement the Big Four agenda. And this strategy is called the Agriculture Sector Transformation and Growth Strategy. And it has 3 anchors and 3 enablers. And the first anchor is the engagement with smallholder farmers. The behavior of the smallholder farmer and how they plant, how they harvest, how they access the market is very key to cutting on wastage, increasing efficiency, and avoiding food losses. So we have a whole pillar where we are trying to create an ecosystem of SMEs around the smallholder farmer so that they don't have to struggle with their produce, so that we reduce on-farm produce, so that we reduce loss of produce during transportation, and so that we also reduce the loss of produce at the market. So that means all our programs are geared towards making the ecosystem of the smallholder farmer more efficient and more friendly to the smallholder farmer, and supportive of the interventions which are being proposed here. The other pillar, of course, which is relevant, is an anchor that we call a growth anchor, which has agro-processing and large-scale farms. The agro-processing parks which we are proposing are also meant to make sure that what is not consumed is processed. I think this is a major part of cutting on wastage. The other thing that we really have as an enabler is the issue of capacity building, and a bit of research into some of these products, so that even at the production level already you have varieties and genotypes that don't rot in 2 days, but they take time, and you're able to do something with that. I think one of the things, the ecosystem issue with the smallholder farmer that we feel is important is warehouses. Most of the farmers sometimes lose their produce because they have nowhere to store it. So it's eaten by grain borers or other pests, post-harvest pests. But the other is just rotting because we don't have a cold chain. So having cold chain facilities, having storage facilities, having processing facilities near farmers is one of the targets. We call them value chain actors. We register them, we register the farmers, and they provide services, and we support them to develop themselves through some of the funding opportunities that are there. And even our markets, I think that is where most of the post-harvest losses take place. It's very characteristic. You go to a market and you find things rotting there, and that is food. And then it's wasted. I'm told about 30% of what goes to the market, especially for fresh produce, it gets wasted. I came across a company, an agri-tech company, Trigger Foods, which sort of changes the model on how to market things directly to the vendor and to the consumer, which saves about 30%. And I think the youth can embrace this model also, so that it goes from farmer to the vendor. But also we must have smart markets, so that immediately that which cannot be sold can be processed on site, and markets which are environmentally friendly and not just selling commodities the way we used to sell in the 1920s. I think there's room for reform, working with counties and the responsible ministries like trade to modernize our markets and to make them smart and to make them environmental friendly, and to make sure that there are no wastages. Finally, of course, at the household level, all of us have to continue changing our culture so that you eat what you buy what you need, and you eat what you can eat, and avoid wastage, taking care of our neighborhoods and making sure that we don't go to wastage. So those are the remarks that I had, and this is important, not just for us in Kenya, but globally, because we still have pockets of population suffering hunger, and it's our collective responsibility to make sure that food is not wasted and food does not deteriorate. When the technologies are there to make sure that that does not happen, we just need to change our habits so that they don't lead to food loss and all the challenges that come with it. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Hamadi Borga, for your statements. Indeed, we need a collective action to address the issues of food loss and waste to ensure that we have enough on our tables, and we are not actually wasting a lot of our resources when it comes to production as well. With those opening statements, I would like to invite our next speakers for this event. The speakers we'll be listening to Hamisi Williams from FAO, he's the Assistant FAO Kenya representative. We'll have Professor Jane Ambuko from the University of Nairobi. And last but not least, we'll have Madam Mary Njuguna, who's the Global Food Nutrition Security Advisor at SNV. So I would like to invite Mr. Hamisi Williams, Assistant FAO Kenya representative, to give his remarks and his presentation. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Njoki. Thank you, Jane. It's good to see you here, the PS and everyone who has managed to join. I'm not sure if I'm very clear because I'm not in the right network, but I think I'm still glad that we are having this discussion. Coming from the UN family, I must say that this is another milestone for the UN, and where UN has taken leadership to show the world what they need to do at the right time. Just a few months ago, we actually celebrated the second World Food Safety Day, and now we are celebrating the first ever World Food Loss and Waste Day, all of which are spearheaded by the United Nations, and I think we need to give a pat at the back. What interests me most is that when we have these conversations and we are celebrating these days, we are, one, creating that awareness, but it also shows that the whole world is really getting conscious of what is happening with the matters food waste and food loss. And therefore, we, in this part of the world, cannot afford to be left behind. And that's why I really thought it was very, very thoughtful of the organizers of this particular webinar, so that we are on the table of this discussion and be able to help shape the world. You know, FAO in particular, is one of the agencies of the UN, has a motto, which is called Fiat Spanish. And that simply translates to let there be bread. And you know, we can't have bread when we are losing it and wasting it. And that word alone really is not a good word to use when you're talking about food waste. It is something that we need to avoid as much as we can. And one of our structures for implementing our programs, we revolve around the UN spearheaded Agenda 2030, which is commonly known as SDG. And if you look at the SDG goals, the key goals there, that is goal 1, no poverty. Goal 2, zero hunger, which really FAO is spearheading a lot. And even coming to goal 12, that talks about sustainable or responsible consumption and production of food. Now, all this revolves around food, and all this sensitizes us also in ensuring that food is produced in the right way, food is contained in the right way, moved in the right way, consumed in the right way, and that way we avoid waste and losses. So that is in the context of what specifically the UN would want. Then what about FAO and what has it done? And on this, at the international stage, then our chief economist has really highlighted, including the statistics, which I don't want to waste the panel's time by repeating because we all listened to the video. And I want to therefore come straight to what about FAO Kenya? What have we done on this and what do we expect to do still going forward? And I will highlight a few areas. First, because of its criticality, the FAO has actually partnered with the WHO and developed what we call the principles of sustainable healthy diets. And out of these principles, if you look at them, principle number 13 out of the 16 is one that talks about reducing food waste and food loss. Now that tells you how critical that is. Now, under that principle, there is highlights and guidelines that should really shape our thinking about matters food waste and food loss and how we want to handle the same going forward. So I want to really ask you to look at those principles. They're available in our website, and then this should guide us, even coming up with policies, strategies, and guidelines that can help also at government level and even at the private sector level for those who are engaged within the chain so that they adopt these principles and use them going forward. So that is one item that we have out there that should be able to help. As FAO Kenya, under our programs, one of them, which is one of the main projects that we've implemented in Kenya, which is called the Improving Smallholder Productivity Project, ISPP, it's famously called. We used that project, and we've done a study on food waste and food loss in Kenya. This study focused on 5 counties of Makueni, Tharaka Nithi, Taita Taveta, Kitui, and Machakos. Now, the study really has very interesting insights that you could look at and see how and why these issues of food waste come in. And then it points to the direction of what we should do policy-wise to be able to address the same. Just a few of the highlights we find, the study tells us that we waste about 20%. You know, there's the overall statistics which we quote that about 30% of food is wasted. But then at what stage do we waste what quantity? That is one of the interesting part of this particular study. So it says that out of that 30%, about 20% of it is wasted at the farm level. So this is where we need to really also be able to do it right, do our farming right, put the right criteria, procedures, and ways of doing our farming so that we avoid the 20% of that 30% wastage that we get. And then it says, now when we come to post-harvest losses alone, this is where again you lose another 30% of the percentage loss that we are, total loss that we are talking about. So that is huge again. And then it also goes deeper and say, even after storage, probably you have sorted all these things. What then happens at the movement level? What then happens at the market level? Because even when you are within the market itself, you got still a lot of wastage that happens there. And when exchanges take place, there are still also wastages that happen. And they say this is about 60% again of what you lose of the 30%. What is interesting to me there is that if therefore we could get those specific areas or stages at which we get what losses, then we should be able to target them with the policy interventions and then be able to address them and reduce on the losses that we may get. And you know, food waste, according to us, again, you look at it, food waste, food loss. This is really like an opportunity. It's not like an opportunity cost, because it's not like when we lose it, we get something. No, this is just purely a lost income. And the study estimates that about 72 billion Kenya shillings is lost every season that we plant or produce food, and then we don't address matters food waste and food loss. So we lose quite a huge amount of income that would have otherwise been on the pockets of the farmers and everybody else involved in the chain, just because we're not addressing the food waste, food loss. So it's critical there. But coming to other specifics that FAO has done and it's looked at, we've taken the approach of going into the sector-specific guide so that you look at the food wastes in what sector and what type of wastage is there, and then that helps you to discern what methods or methodologies you'll use to be able to address that. So like in the pastoralist settings, we're looking much into the areas of milk preservation. FAO has done quite a lot in terms of supporting the farmers and milk producers in terms of yogurt production, those that can be preserved and take a long time, so that in the year round, especially when they avoid issues like glut, because they're able to turn this into a storable form, which can last longer, and that way they will be able to sustain production, sustain the market and the supply. This has been happening in the areas of Kiambu. We have projects there in Nyandarua and North Rift, parts of the North Rift. In other areas, we got this some of these areas where in a particular time of the season, they have really mass production. They get quite a lot of production, especially on the vegetables. So what we're measuring on is the technologies that help in the drying of the leafy vegetables. And this could be used, therefore, when there are times of scarcity or drought, so that you ensure that you have dietary supply maybe throughout the year. So that is also one of the technologies that we are encouraging and we are promoting as part of ways of preventing food waste and food loss. In aquaculture, this has become, as we are doing now as a matter of policy within FAO Kenya, that all the projects that are revolving around aquaculture, we got to inculcate aspects of nutrition and aspects of food preservation, so that fish products that are really will be very highly perishable, you prolong their their life, so lifespan, so that they can be stored for long and be used in future. And that also gives the farmers the time enough to be able to even start engaging on the export market, because when you preserve, then you are able to send them far. It's also an aspect of allowing the farmers to be able to negotiate, because if you have these food items and they're perishable and you don't have a way of preserving them and keeping them for long, then your negotiating power or bargaining power as a farmer is reduced almost to the minimum. So when they do this, preserve, they're able to also engage in proper negotiations that will help them in also getting better pricing. I wouldn't end this without mentioning the COVID-19 pandemic. And all of us know FAO supported the government on this in developing the guideline for sustaining healthy eating at household levels. And this was actually given to the public by the government, the Ministry of Agriculture, on how then can we be able to live and still, live healthy under the COVID-19 pandemic. And the key in there was this aspect of you wouldn't be getting food supplies maybe as frequently as you used to be. So the bigger question here was, how do you preserve what you have and still get it fresh and healthy for your, and fresh and good for your health. And we got the guidelines out, which the government issued, and this is really a very critical part that FAO has played here. Let me wind up by two issues, bringing in 2 points out. What then is needed is an honest dialogue, which I think we are starting, to be able to upscale some of these initiatives. As the PS says there, we have the strategy, we could have the strategy, but, and this could be hidden in some corner somewhere. Every organization trying to do one or two things. Probably we may want to have now a very central, focused strategy or policy or framework, whichever we want to call it, that is going to tie the players in the chain, both from production to movements to the market up to consumption level on the matters of food waste and food loss. Give people the awareness, and also let people that are involved take responsibility for some of the things we do, because some of them are things that we can easily avoid. Now that we know that food waste really consumes a lot of what we should avoid and get, food waste really contributes to part of, food insecurity in Kenya. We should actually put some measures that could also, even at some level, be deterrent to the players, so that we are able to avoid this. So that would require a lot of dialogue between inter-government, that is national, and the county governments. But at the county government, where really the rubber meets the road, we must have some talk between the counties, because they trade across themselves, and within the counties themselves as well. What strategies do they have? And I want to just say that as FAO will be ready to support such initiatives going forward. So finally, if you allow me, I'll leave you with a quote which says, "Cutting food waste is delicious way. It's a delicious way of saving money, helping to feed the world, and protecting the climate." Thank you, thank you, thank you, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hamisi. Indeed, a lovely quote from you where indeed cutting food waste is a delicious way to really save on costs. And I think one of the biggest numbers that you've highlighted is the 72 billion that we're losing every season from production all the way to consumption in terms of food loss and waste. And indeed, this is something that all value chain actors need to rally together to address, because this is indeed a responsibility that cuts across the value chain actors. Next, I would like to invite Madam Mary Njuguna. She's the Global Food Nutrition Security Advisor at SNV, to give us some insights into what SNV is doing at the county level and also national level, and give us some insights into how research and evidence has actually assisted us in pushing forward the agenda on food loss and waste. Karibu, Mary.
Thanks, Brenda, and thanks for colleagues that have shared. Indeed, I will share some of the work that SNV has done. I will share from the experience of the Voice for Change Partnership. That is an advocacy, evidence-based advocacy project that has been implemented here in Kenya, as well as 5 other countries. So we looked within food and nutrition security, and we focused our advocacy work at the county level on food post-harvest loss in dairy and horticulture products. But before I go there, maybe I can just highlight the Voice for Change partnership is implemented by SNV and IFPRI. And we also work with civil society organizations. It was mainly meant to bring out evidence and create awareness with policymakers with a view to creating change and lasting solutions. So part of the reasons that we wanted to work with evidence is because we believe that government and private sector, key actors, really needed to listen to the particular evidence coming out of our research work, so that once they adapt, whether it is the policies or whether the market adapts new ways of working, then you can expect that there would be sustainable change. So we aimed for systemic change. So what we have done with the Voice for Change, working with civil society organizations, together with groups of farmer organizations and community champions, we've been able to provide them with evidence coming out of studies that IFPRI has undertaken. I'll possibly not go too much into the details of the study findings, because also the presentation from FAO has also highlighted some of the key findings. But we were able to undertake some studies, for example, on the status of post-harvest loss or losses in general in the tomato value chain in Laikipia County, potatoes in Nyandarua County, and in general one on fruits. Brenda, if you can proceed. So working with the evidence, the idea was to create awareness bottom up, create awareness with the farmer organizations, enabling them and empowering them to understand that they can actually seek help and they can influence the way their governments are running, and also influence changes with the post-harvest loss. So, for example, if you look at the situation of horticulture, we found that the tomato value chain, for instance, I have listened to the numbers that have been provided before, but sometimes it could even be more acute. In the case of our study in Laikipia on tomatoes, we found that sometimes it could even be higher than 50% of loss for the various reasons, whether it is during production, handling, or within the supply chain. One of the other things that we intended to address is to look for lasting solutions. How can we be able to introduce technologies that can be applied either at farm level or within the supply chain? And the studies exist, and we are willing to share those. And one of the findings we got is that there are emerging low-cost, effective post-harvest technologies that are available. However, they are not fully adapted, and sometimes you end up with only small pilots that is not gaining the scale that can enable, strategic change within the sector. Part of that is basically just knowledge transfer, and I would agree with my brother from FAO that sometimes our work is so isolated that we are not really benefiting everybody. So usual challenges of access to credit for the farmers is a major challenge. So there is need for a combined support, especially with extension, that enables farmers to be able to internalize and to access and to get information for these new technologies. So it's not just a matter of downloading technologies, it's also understanding where the farmers are coming from and accompanying them in order for them to be able to adapt these new technologies. The other thing that is very important is the role of the private sector, because private sector in some situations have been able to introduce on a pilot level storage facilities, cold chains. We've seen that with potatoes in some areas in Laikipia, some areas in Bomet area, where you have either quite advanced or adapted technologies that farmers can be able to utilize. But before that can happen, the political agenda, especially for policy change, is important. How are we investing in our infrastructure to be able to attract private sectors into some of these areas? We really need to also work together with the policymakers. And then, of course, like the PS has mentioned, the technology related to the quality of seed also needs to be addressed. So in a nutshell, what we are doing with the Voice for Change is creating a movement of people that are aware and can articulate their concerns to their immediate government. So let me just highlight that within the counties where we worked, Nakuru, Nyandarua, Laikipia, and Murang'a, and we were looking at both dairy and horticulture, we've now got groups of stakeholder actors that are working together and addressing the concerns. Some of the concerns can be immediate. For example, some smallholder farmers working together have been able to influence their county governments in how they are distributing, for example, their milk chillers. In some areas, we've had situations where the community of farmer champions have been able to influence, upgrading of access routes, which basically prohibit farmers from supplying their milk, even where private sector wants to come in. So I agree with the perspective of a joint effort, but also knowing that it is not only a boardroom conversation. If farmers are, I think they feel the heat most of post-harvest loss. If they're well empowered, we have seen them taking steps and beginning to create traction and small gains at the local level. So the other perspectives is that we have received very positive collaboration by the county governments. So as we speak, those county governments that I've mentioned either have a policy or a subsector strategy that has basically highlighted the concern for the value chains that are important to them. So for example, Murang'a County, Laikipia County, Nakuru County do have now a dairy strategic plan, and within the dairy strategic plan, the area of post-harvest loss has been highlighted. Where we were timely, we've also been able to we have been able to influence inclusion in the CIDP, which paves way, for instance, for budget allocation. And with the horticulture commodities, basically we are also looking at working with the private sector And some people have already begun to reflect on how to install the cold storage in particular sites. So it's a big conversation. It's a multi-stakeholder engagement, so that if we're talking about the tomato challenge in Laikipia, conversations ongoing with private sector investors who basically can be able to invest more in value addition. So it's not a one entity action. It's basically going to be a collaborative initiative. So with the project itself, we've also invested a lot in producing material, handbooks that can be utilized by different actors. So we have materials that, whether it's the production guides, that can be utilized by extensionists on the ground to facilitate producer organizations as they do their production, but also much more elaborate post-harvest management material that can be handled by other actors, whether it's SMEs, etc., and also for policymakers. So in a nutshell, we basically scratched the surface. A lot of work still needs to be done, and we are open to the conversation of having greater collaboration with other organizations, because it's a huge task ahead. Thank you very much, Brenda.
Thank you so much, Mary, for those insights. And indeed, systemic change is possible, and with evidence that assists us in creating awareness for post-harvest loss and waste, we can indeed try and get to the root cause and really ensure that our stakeholders understand the different roles that they play within the value chain. And technologies are available, as you stated, and there needs to be that closure of the gap between the research aspect, the evidence that is being developed, and those who need access to that knowledge. And with that, last but not least, research, of course, plays a very key role in ensuring that we are providing that information to the stakeholders that need to have this information in place. And I'd like to invite Professor Jane Ambuko from the University of Nairobi to provide us with some insights. What technologies are available? What capacity building initiatives do we have in place that we can use to really ensure the stakeholders within the value chain understand what food loss and waste is and how we can reduce this? Karibu, Professor Jane Ambuko.
Okay, so thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm gonna just, I think, as I listen to the other speakers talk, it's like they're speaking to my presentation. So I'm really happy with this comments, or rather the presentation from the PS, Professor Hamadi and Borga, from Mr. Hamisi from FL, and now Mary from the field. So I'm coming from research, and I'm going to talk about awareness creation activities that we've done, technologies and capacity building initiatives for food loss and waste reduction. And so that is just a summary of what I'm going to talk about. I hope I can just rush through everything. I will give a small background, which already, unfortunately, some of us joined after the video by the FAO chief economist was played, but it gave a background to the losses. Yeah, so I'll just, I don't need to go back to that. So that is the outline of the presentation I'm gonna have. So again, as I said, this data was already highlighted by the chief economist. So he talked about 14%. And I think one thing that we need to note is that the 14% that was quoted by the chief economist actually is the losses that happened until excluding the retail and consumer stages. But the report that Mr. Hamisi and even the PS quoted, the 30% is an earlier report, which we're still quoting that we lose 30%. But again, as the previous speakers have highlighted, data gaps is a big challenge for us when you're talking about addressing the problem. When you don't know the magnitude of the problem, then really we need to tackle that bit. How much are we really losing? Yes, and the graph you can see there is a disaggregation by value chain, and previous speakers have really emphasized the aspect of perishables, the fruits and veggies. You can see out of the 100% of the 1.3 billion tons that is lost, 44%, that is quoting the FAO data of 2011, 44% of that loss is in fruits and veggies. That means a lot needs to be done in the perishable commodities, okay? So when we disaggregate this data further by region, I had the PS allude to this, the fact that we lose, I think the PS or Mr. Miss said that 20% of what we lose actually happens at the early stages of the supply chain. So if you can see the graph that you have there, we're talking about the total loss is 36%, that is based on the FAO report of 2011. Most of that, as you can see, happens at the early stages of the supply chain. We call this the upstream stages. Yeah, that is at harvest and immediately after harvest. So most of the losses happen there in sub-Saharan Africa, and most of that is attributed to bad practices and lack of technology. So as it was I think the previous speakers mentioned, for us to tackle this problem of food loss and waste, we look at the supply chain from harvest all the way to consumption. The question we have to ask ourselves is, how much do we lose at each stage? What are the causes of losses at each of these stages of the supply chain? And what technologies, or the question I have to ask is, are there technologies, or what technologies could be used at these various stages to reduce losses? And most importantly, how can we make these technologies accessible to those that need to use them to reduce the losses, okay? So that brings me to the call to action, because this day that we're celebrating today is actually a call to action. And as others have said, reducing losses and waste in our supply chain is a responsibility for all of us. So pull out from the FAO brochure about the call to action, there's call to action for government, for private sector, for development partners, for civil society. So I'm going to speak to the call to action to us in research and academia. So the specific call to action to us is we need to develop technologies to reduce food loss and waste. Yes, we need to train and build capacity of the practitioners in the food chain. But this is not there in the call to action, but we, as part of our outreach activities at university, we are creating awareness. Not just about the problem of food loss and waste, but what innovations, what technologies are there? What practices can we use to reduce the losses? There's a call to action to consumers. Each one of us is a consumer, okay? What are we doing with food? I think the previous speaker mentioned the fact that, sometimes we think that the responsibility to reduce losses is government, is somebody else. But each one of us has a responsibility. How do you manage food in your house? How much, you ask yourself today, how much food did you put in the dustbin that shouldn't have gone there? Okay, so there's something we can do for us by managing our food stock in our houses. Do we have surplus that can be donated, that can be given to others who are in need? Are we doing that part? Okay, so let us do the call to action to us. All of us here are consumers. Before we look at what we researchers should do, government should do, what are you doing as an individual on this issue of food loss and food waste reduction? Now, in terms of us as academia creating awareness, we have done our bit. Yes, creating awareness, not just about the problem, but about the solutions, okay? Some of us may be aware or have participated in something that we started as research institutions. We teamed up with the other academic institutions, research institutions like Calro, and then with the support of development partners, we started the All Africa Post-Harvest Congress exhibition. And that Congress and exhibition is in its third phase, okay? We've done two. The first one in 2017, the second one was last year in 2019. There's gonna be a third one next year. And the objective of this Congress is awareness creation, okay? Because I think people haven't understood that this is really a problem, that food loss and waste is a problem. We cannot have sustainable food systems when we are losing 30% of the food that we produce. okay? Another objective was to share knowledge. Yes, share data about food loss. And people have to know. Let us get the facts. What are we losing? Why are we losing? Okay. The other objective is to showcase technologies or innovations that can be used. Okay. So you can see the Congress is not just a talk shop for academia. It's its vision. We have people showcasing technologies that can be used. But of course, one thing that other speakers have mentioned, that for us to drive this agenda, there has to be partnership. All of us have to engage and know what is the role of each one of us. So part of the goal of the objective of the Congress is to bring partners together so that we can forge partnerships, linkages for this, to address the problem of food loss in the West, okay? So this call to action coming from the Post-Harvest Congress, you can see the call to action that came from FAO. If you look at the call to action coming from the Post-Harvest Congress, basically they are the same. It's about awareness creation, it's about data, it's about technology scaling, okay? It's how do we make these technologies accessible to the people that need to use them? These are the call, this is the call to action coming from the Post-Harvest Congress. But see, this call to action remains a call to action unless we action. We take our role and do what has to be done to address to address the problem. Okay, so from the call to action, both from FAO, from the post-harvest congresses that we've had, I'm going to pick two examples of technology because we have been tasked with research to find technologies and innovations that are going to address the problem. So I'm going to just speak to, because when we talk about the food loss and waste problem, is everything from production all the way from seed. The CS mentioned about, do we have varieties that have good shelf life, have good storage capacity? That is part of it, but I will not talk about that because there's so much that needs to be talked about. So I'm going to focus on two that have been talked about by previous speakers. Cold storage. I've had this echoed in every forum I've attended lately. Everybody's talking about cold chain, cold storage. How do we get this technology? What are they? What are these affordable technologies that farmers need to reduce losses? So we have cold storage technologies for perishables, and then we have storage technologies for grains. Again, the previous speakers talked about storage. That is when you look at the research that has been done, studies that have been done in some of this value chain, there's emphasis on what is happening on farm. Lack of storage at the farm is one of the factors, one of the drivers, critical loss points in the supply chain. Okay, so I'm going to talk about two. There's a dry chain for grains. What do we need to do? What are these technologies and practices that we need to reduce losses in grains? And then for the perishables, we talk about the cold chain. What are the technologies and practices that we need to preserve our fresh produce and reduce losses that we saw, the 40 to 50% that data that we talk about? What do we need to do? What are these technologies? Okay, so this is, you look at this picture I put here. This is the plight of smallholder farmers of grains. Okay, they can produce. We know they don't produce much, but they can produce enough to feed themselves. But what happens on farm? You and I know I'm speaking from experience, that because of lack of storage at the farm, what happens? Our smallholders, they harvest their produce, yes, and since they don't have storage on farm, we have a lot of quantitative losses. You can see on my slide on that is the storage pest, the weevils. Okay, they finish. Even if they store, they try and some of them put some chemical to store, but still most of the losses happen because of the post-harvest pests of the grains. Okay, so farmers, because they lack storage, they lose their produce. If they don't lose, they're forced to sell at low prices. You need to go right now in the grain baskets of this country, find people, the farmers are harvesting. They don't have storage. What are they doing? They're selling to traders at a very low price. Right now, I think the bag of maize is going for like 2,500 shillings. Okay, what will happen a few months later? These same farmers, because they didn't have storage, they have to repurchase that grain for their own consumption. Okay, that is the plight of smallholder grain farmers. And what is the plight of horticultural farmers? Now, this I'm going to use mango because it's my favorite fruit. Now, mango, highly perishable. Most of the farmers have no storage. For them, storage is what you see in the middle photo. You harvest, you put it under the tree. You're waiting for the buyer. What happens to those mangoes? If the buyer doesn't come to pick them up, they're going to rot. So a lot of wastage at the farm. We talked about 40 to 50%. So farmers are at the masses, yeah? So either you leave your fresh produce to rot away in the field, or you just sell at low prices to the traders because you don't have an option. So basically, when we talk about cold storage, which is something that has been talked about, but we haven't, so what, how do we get this storage low cost, or rather cold storage technologies to the farmers? Now we have done something with some farmers and we have been working in a project called Yellowwise, which is supported by the Rockefeller Foundation. We've tried what we're calling the smallholder aggregation as a way to get farmers organized in groups, have them use cold storage. What can they do? Reduce losses, improve market access. I think the previous speakers talked about the fact that, you see, because of the challenge smallholders have, the little volumes of what they have challenges marketing the produce. So market access, that is something that can happen. Then ultimately, for those that depend on this produce for their livelihoods, if they cannot sell, and this is what they depend on for their income, what does it mean? Their livelihoods is negatively affected, because, you know, if you can't sell, and that is your source of livelihood, then it just basically means you're stuck in poverty, okay? So these are examples. You talked about research. These are some examples of some of the technologies that we have been involved to scale up for storage at the on-farm level and aggregation for smallholder farmers. This technology, I will not unpack, but they can speak for themselves. These are simple, Mary talked about low-cost technologies, which have remained pilots. Yes, they've been pilots, but for us, we have moved beyond pilot and gone to the farmers. We have worked with farmers in a place called Karuma in Embu County, in Machakos, Masi. We are working with the WFP, with the traders in Turkana to have these technologies adopted. I remember the PS, or is it Mr. Miss, who said there's a lot, no, the PS said the fact that a lot of wastage happens at the market. Do we need cold storage at the market? Yes, we do. We need innovative cold storage at the market, because a lot of what is not sold goes to waste at the market. But with cold storage, they can actually preserve that produce for later sale. So what happens when farmers have access to this kind of cold storage? We're talking about them being able to aggregate their small volumes into quantities that the traders can buy. Two, farmers organized in groups with this kind of storage can negotiate. I think the PS talked about this, the fact that they are at the masses of traders, but if they're empowered in groups with storage, they can negotiate for better prices. Most importantly, they are under no pressure to sell. Because remember what I said, without storage, your mangoes you harvested, they're under the tree. The buyer didn't buy. What are you supposed to do? You do nothing. They're going to rot. So you might as well just take whatever you're offered. So, but with cold storage, there's no pressure to sell. You can actually store your produce and sell later. So that is the benefit of smallholder aggregation with cold storage. Now we come to the grains. I said technologies are there, and I think Mary also alluded to the fact that technologies are there. We've all heard about hermetic storage. Hermetic storage is not new, it has been there, but how many farmers know about this technology? It's not just the bags. We have metal silos, we have plastic silos. Some of us probably, I bet some of you have never seen this other technologies that are on the left. Those are the doom. These are technologies for, it's hermetic storage. Yes, there's the cocoon and there's the dome. Okay, these technologies are for aggregation, for farmers who can, of course, if it's a farmer who can produce this, some of this can take up to 5 tons of produce. Now, these can be used in village aggregation centers. And this has been tested by some private sector people, where we have what they're calling, I know the PS talked about the warehouse system, which is being done by the Eastern African Grain Council. But then we have smallholder, a lower level of aggregation, lower than the warehouses, where with technologies, yeah, for storage. Now, this model has been tested by some private sector actors, where you have an aggregation center, which is equipped with simple early stage processing machine. Here we have a grain sheller, we have facilities for drying and then storage. If farmers who do not have storage at their home, at their at the household level, they can actually bring their produce here. First of all, they can be shared. It can be shared. Now, this is something that can be done as by entrepreneurs, the SMEs you're talking about, young people who can run these shellers at this aggregation center. You shell for farmers at a price. Then you have these drying facilities, dry the grains to the right moisture content, and then store. This is what EAGC is doing at a larger scale, but then we can scale it down at a lot smaller than the level of EAGC, because what is lacking is storage. How do we get storage to our farmers so that they don't lose their grain? Okay, so that is, I just want to talk about those two initiatives, the smallholder aggregation for fresh produce and then smallholder aggregation for grains. Both of these are possible, they can work, and they can make a whole lot of difference in terms of reducing losses and improving market access for these farmers. Okay, then we have the training as part of the call to action for us in academic institution is to train. This is what we do. That is our core mandate: training and capacity building, and that's what you're doing. We're not only training students. I'd like to say that for us, we are doing more than train students. So here, I just want to introduce this. This is a new training unit at the University of Nairobi. Here, we're talking about cold chain. Here is a place where we can train. We are doing adaptive research, but more than that, we are doing training of students. We are doing training of entrepreneurs, people who want to be involved. We're having, like now this week, we have people who have been promoting this unit. They're coming to see how can we actually engage youth, can actually provide storage as a service. Yes, so this is for us is a training unit where we showcase what is possible, so that those who can use this technology can adapt it either for use as users to store, but also as a service for those who want to engage, to provide a service of post-harvest loss reduction. Another thing we're doing at the University of Nairobi, we have this hub. We are training. I had the previous speaker talk about processing, value addition. You know, even if you do value addition, you produce products that are of no quality. They will not sell, and they'll not give you the nutrients that you're talking about. So if you're doing value addition, it's got to be proper. So at the University of Nairobi, we have this hub, which is established recently. What you're doing here is to build capacity of processors, whether they're young entrepreneurs or the people who are establishing the business. We want to train you to do value addition, process high quality products that meet the market requirements. So this is what we've done. We've done training for students, we are training farmers, we're training processors, and so we welcome partners who want to partner with us so that we can do this value addition of our produce. So as a parting shot for me, and this was echoed in the video that we watched, we have set targets. And I'm glad I heard from the CS that we have targets to reduce losses to 5%. Now that is a very ambitious target. So I don't know where we are at, but whatever we need to do to reduce the losses to 5%, all of us need to get involved. For SDG, we're talking about halving the losses by the year 2030, halving the losses, post-harvest losses by the year 2030. And in Africa, the African Union Commission or the African Union heads of state have committed to actually halve the post-harvest losses by the year 2025. My friends, to get this, lot has to be done. And like I said, from the call to action that was given at the beginning, all of us have a role to play. And I want to echo what Mr. Hamisi said. You know, when you reduce post-harvest losses, it's not just the losses you're reducing only. It touches on all the SDGs. Yes, this slide you can see the SDG one about no poverty, the one on zero hunger, the one on climate action. All these are directly or indirectly affected or impacted by reduction of food loss. So the call to action is for all of us to get involved, do our bit. We do our bit. So all of us have something to do to ensure that, these targets, whether ours, the national targets, or the African Union target, or the Sustainable Development Target of the United Nations, we all have a role to play. So let us all play. Thank you so much. So these are our partners that we worked with for the post-harvest conference, the second post-harvest conference, and these are our research partners who are helping us to drive this agenda. We are in this for the long haul. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Professor, for that very insightful presentation. And indeed, technologies do exist that can address food loss and waste. And we can see that University of Nairobi, with the research that you're doing, you are actually trying to bridge that gap between research and actual practice on the ground. And I'm very happy to see that you actually have a processing hub. And I think we should all make an effort to visit the University of Nairobi and see this hub and really see this as an opportunity to actually train those within the industry on how to develop products that are value added, and not only value addition in terms of post-harvest loss management, but those that can be uptaken by the market itself. And as we continue with this webinar, I'd like to remind you that we have our hashtag FLW. You can use on Twitter and Facebook. Post your questions on the Q&A section, and we will have those questions read out. We also have a Mentimeter survey that is running, that is posted on the chat. And I've been seeing quite a number of you responding to the Mentimeter survey that has been posted. Really questions asking you, what do you think about food loss and waste? What is the difference between food loss and waste? Maybe if we could see some of those responses from Mentimeter to see what we actually understand to be either food loss and waste, and what are some of the expectations that you have as participants coming to this webinar in regards to food loss and waste. So as we wait for those results to be shared on our screens, I'd like to move to some of the questions that have been posted on the chat box, and I will be directing the questions to who they are directed to. The first question I can see from the chat box here is from Selina Iseme. Her question is directed to the PS, Professor Hamadi Borga. The question reads, the Ministry of Agriculture has developed a strategy which has several pillars targeting smallholder farmers. The question is, are there any wins that have been realized from this particular strategy? I'm assuming this is the ASTGS. And how many smallholder farmers have benefited or will benefit from the warehouse receipting system? That is a question from Selina Iseme. Buena PS, if you could take up that question. And I think I've seen another question from Dr. Kiprono Philemon, similar to what Selina has asked in regards to commodity exchange and warehouse receipting system. Where are we in terms of legislation? So the two questions are centered around how are these strategies going to assist smallholder farmers, and how are smallholder farmers going to benefit from the warehousing receipting system?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Smallholder farmers make the bulk of our producers, but they rarely have storage facilities that are appropriate for good storage of their products. And for 10 years, we've been developing the warehouse receipting system, which eventually was approved. And we have a warehouse receipting council in place, and the warehouse receipting regulations undergoing validation so that that space can be better regulated. And the idea is for smallholder farmer to take advantage of the system, to have their produce stored in certified warehouses, waiting for price discovery so that they can get better prices. We are assuming that all farmers who are dealing either with the commodities that will be traded under this system, which is mainly maize, rice, beans, green grams, that they will take advantage of this, and all our smallholder farmers will understand the system and benefit from it. And I think it requires a bit of, not just a bit, a lot of education and explanation. There was a pilot which was done by the East African Grain Council, but we need to partner with them to scale the pilot so that people see the benefits that can come from adopting this system, both for them in terms of income, but also for all of us in terms of reducing post-harvest losses. In terms of the 9 pillars, all our pillars, I think like majority of our pillars are targeting the smallholder farmer. Because even when we talk about capacity building, building household resilience, and creating 1,000 SMEs to support the smallholder farmer. Using the e-voucher, all of it is targeting the smallholder farmer. In the SDGs, we are talking about 1 million farmers, but I think we have surpassed that with all our programs, because we have many programs with different development partners targeting the smallholder farmer. One of the things that we are doing is trying to harmonize this program so that there is no duplicity, and streamlining their registers. So we are creating what we call draft 0 of the register of smallholder farmer, so that it can grow incrementally and so that we can reach more people. So the strategy is under implementation. That is why you have the WRS in place, the reforms of the strategic food reserve. All our programs are value chain based, and so value chain actors are being implemented. The e-voucher is a big deal. Now we have 4.5 billion going to farmers who are dealing with rice, maize, and Irish potato and sorghum across the country, supporting them. And these are smallholder farmers. With input using e-voucher, we have stopped the business of fertilizer, purchase of fertilizer, because of all the problems that were associated with that. So you can see that the strategy is being implemented and it's working. And we request stakeholders, including the farmers themselves, to let go of what they were familiar with, because it is this very thing that created all these problems in the sector. And so long as we cling to some of those practices, we'll never get out. So sometimes it's scary to let go, but it's necessary for growth and for transformation of the sector. And I think we are on the right track as far as implementation is concerned. We have the Agricultural Transformation Office, which is monitoring implementation.
Thank you so much, Professor Hamadi Borga, for that response. Next question, I'd like to direct this to Professor Jane Ambuko. A question from Ben Solomon Baraka. How affordable are some of these technologies that should curb the losses? And is there a high willingness for farmers to pay for them or disbursement of these technologies? Are they reliant on donor funds? Maybe Dr. Jane Ambuko, you could pick that up. Affordability of these post-harvest loss technologies and willingness to pay.
Okay, so you know, I talked about the storage technologies. I also talk, the grain ones, and then we have the cold chain ones. So I'll talk about the cold chain ones. They're affordable in terms of what we have done is to actually bring the cost down. How? For example, I didn't elaborate about the technologies you're talking about. One of the cheapest of the cold storage ones that we introduced in Kenya, and we have advanced in developing various versions of it for different users, and which is the one we have scaled in Karurumo, in Muchakos, and now with WFP, we're trying to take this to the market in Turkana, is the zero energy brick cooler. Now this one, the cost really depends on availability of material. It's all brick, sand, water. Okay, so if a farmer can be able to burn the bricks and get riverbed sand, and then the cost here is just piping for the dripping and then the water tank. So that can be as cheap as, say, $300 to $500. I think that is fair enough, given the benefits of this kind of technology. Again, one of the ones that I mentioned there is we have the Coolbot cold room. This technology this one we've been trying to scale it in Kenya. It hasn't gone very far, but you can be sure with the, say, $7,000, $6,000 to $7,000, you can get a Coolbot cold room. Now, a Coolbot cold room is as good as your conventional cold room. You have to ask yourself, what is the price of a conventional cold room of 4x4? 4x4 meters. So it is, it's actually saying low cost, it's affordable. And then you are asking about the willingness to pay. We recently did a study with some economics, with the economic student to find out how much, are farmers willing to pay. The thing here is, what we found out is that as individual farmers, it doesn't even make sense for a smallholder horticultural farmer, to invest into like a cold room, zero energy. A zero energy brick cooler is affordable, can be afforded because it's really the capacity is small and the cost is low. But for a Coolbot cold room, for example, this is the type that you need farmers who are organized in groups. And when they're organized in groups, there's the willingness to pay. But down to the technologies for the grains. That hermetic bag, I think we've all seen them. They cost something between 200 and 250 shillings, okay? I believe, and they're reusable. I believe what needs to be done is, create awareness of the fact that this bag, if it's used properly, it can be reused over and over. So, and I think the benefits that accrue from using hermetic bag, if it's properly used, is worth the investment. Because when you use hermetic bag and your grains are properly stored, you don't use any chemicals to put in your grain before storage. So basically you're talking about, investment over which you can use over years, and your grain is stored clean and nice. Okay, so I believe they are pretty affordable, and what we need to do, I've had a discussion about, can this be subsidized so that they're more affordable? I don't know how much, maybe the PS can tell us, is there any kind of subsidy that can be afforded for farmers who, especially, for example, for the hermetic bags, because right now it's retailing for between 200 and 250. Is there any option, policy or incentive for farmers to adopt this kind of, just the way we give subsidies for fertilizers? Can there be incentives for storage technology? Because it's a weak link, storage technologies. Can there be incentives so that, these bags of storage technologies are affordable for our farmers? Thank you. I hope I've answered the questions.
Yeah, thank you so much, Professor Jane Ambuko, for that response. There are still quite a number of questions that I can see on the chat box. And there's one specifically being directed to FAO and the PS. The question is from Linox Ochieng. What are some of the strategies we put in place in curbing food losses within aquaculture value chains to curb within Kenya? Are there enough storage facilities to sustain such losses? Don't we think immature fish harvesting within our lakes will eventually contribute to total loss? Mr. Hamis Williams, is this a question you can provide some insight to? Aquaculture value chains and the losses that you're experiencing in that sector.
Is Hamis still there, really?
Yes, I'm here.
Yes, he's there.
Yeah, if you can hear me, sorry, I'm actually juggling between another meeting with World Bank here, and I got to just attend to this particular question. A good one. First, we really have to come to some terms that there are really a lot of losses when it comes to the area of aquaculture. And this is why, first of all, what I had indicated before as one of the things that FAO has done is to inculcate matters nutrition and food preservation in all our aquaculture programs. So what this means is that whatever we are doing in promoting aquaculture in Kenya, working together with the State Department of Fisheries, then we are also creating awareness, building capacity, supporting the communities that are involved and the fish farmers that are involved with matters aquaculture on fish preservation of fish products, so that they can last longer than what they are now. We got also programs, especially now around Lake Victoria, one that we call True Fish program, that is involved in supporting those that are natives and ensuring that we ensure their continuity. This also a program that also, there's also now another program. I think this is the most interesting one for us, where there was this virus that was really affecting fish production in Lake Victoria and also in inland fish, especially tilapia. And this FAO has really invested in terms of research to be able to address this particular one. And I can tell you that that has been very successful, and the monies has been wiped out. The other part of it is that therefore, what we got, what the farmers now get is devoid of this particular virus. And then now they're able to, this makes fish able to survive for long, and then preservation is made easier. At the coastal region, now we're just launching a project which we call the coral reef management, which is encompassing 5 countries. One of the countries is Kenya, and this one is also handy because it's looking at the type of what we do with the aquaculture and how that affects also what is already existing within the sea and how best to do it. But then after the harvesting of farmed fish, the matters preservation comes in. We've supported the government in establishment of what we call fish processing plants, and also ensuring that these plants operate optimally by capacity building the farmers around the plants to be able to produce, and then also ensuring that the plants themselves are functional all the times. You go to plants in Migori, Nyeri, Meru, and another one in Kakamega. So these ones are running, and all they do is they will support in processing, and then after that, then the products are able to be preserved for some time. So this is what is happening there with FAO now, and I yield. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Hamisi. Bwana PS, did you want to add a bit more onto what Mr. Hamisi has provided?
Yeah, I think what I can add is that the State Department of Fisheries, the PS, Prof. Santiba, they have some programs relating to the fisheries sector, mostly construction of fish landing sites across the country, both inland as well as marine fisheries. And the idea is to equip these fish landing sites for equipment that will stem the post-harvest losses. And there is also a World Bank program which was recently launched also for the 6 coastal county, basically to strengthen the capacity of the producer organization, the fisher folk organization, the vendors in the fish value chain. I think part of the problem is a mindset thing. I don't know whether it's a mindset or it's a knowledge or it's a culture thing. Allow me to say this. Sometimes I cross the ferry and I see fishermen, they are dangling fish in the air like this. They don't have cool boxes. They basically, it's, when you try to ask them, why don't you have a cool box so that it can preserve longer? Because most of the time, if you buy fish at the ferry, most likely it will be rotten already. And they say it's too heavy for us. So they'd rather sell you rotten fish than just invest a little bit in a cool box. And I see this in Sagana. Sometimes when you pass there, you see these guys dangling fish in the air or waiting for passerbys. The same case in Naivasha, all these catfish. So I think we have a lot of work to do to educate the smallholder farmer, because I think the commercial farmers, they know what to do. They're in this for investments, and they know what to do. This knowing what to do and knowing how to protect the small investments so that food does not rot while you watch. I think we need to invest a lot in this. And it's not in giving them these things. It's in making them aware that it's necessary to have these things so that it's from within. I think the ministry has given a lot of things over the years with the same results because of just the dependency. And probably we need to work on other models, which maybe we need to talk to other stakeholders to figure out how can we get people out of, as they plan these investments and they think commercial, they make the right investments at all parts of the value chain so that they can raise their incomes. I know Mbuko talks about subsidy for the hermetic bags. Sometimes, is it really about subsidy or is it about knowledge? Because if you don't buy the hermetic bags because they didn't give you a subsidy as government, and you lose all your maize, so what is the point? So I think beyond subsidy and all these goodies that we try pushing to farmers at times, it's a conversation about why the farmers are doing what they're doing and how they will do the right thing so that they can protect their investments in terms of time, energy, resources, and so on and so forth by just going an extra mile to buy that bag, or just going an extra mile to buy that cool box, or just going an extra mile to organize themselves into groups so that they can invest in a cooler. It's even easier for us to reach them when they're in groups, but it's quite problematic dealing with the smallholder farmer, be they growing maize or they're fishing. It's still a challenge because of the inability to embrace new ways of working and the challenge of organizing themselves.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Professor Hamadi Borga, for those insights, and also to Dr. Ambuko, and also Mr. Hamisi, and also to Mary Njuguna for those presentations. Indeed, quite insightful, and I hope your questions have been answered. And I think what has really come out is there is need for behavioral change, there's need for awareness creation, there's a need for transfer of knowledge and technologies to the stakeholders who actually need to use these technologies. So on your screens, you can see the Mentimeter survey results. And ideally, we're asking different questions to see how people understand, or how do people understand what food loss and food waste is. So I can see first question was, what is the role of consumers in tackling food loss and waste? So looking at ourselves as consumers, do we think we have any role to play? And I can see some of the main responses are: purchase what is enough, buy smart, recycle food, and stay informed. So quite insightful. We do have a role as consumers in ensuring that we minimize food waste and food loss. Our next session will be a panel discussion, and especially looking at the role of private sector, role of the public sector as well, in playing a role in addressing food loss and waste, and also looking at civil society. They have a role to play in ensuring that those that they represent within the community are aware of their role in addressing food loss and food waste. So for the panel discussion, we have a very able team. First, we have Ricky Aguda, the CEO of Society of Crop Agribusiness Advisors. Then we have Dr. Daniel Mailudha, CEO of the Kenyan National Farmers Federation, KENAF. We also have Mr. Charles Gitau, the Country Director of the Kenya Chapter, Africa Agribusiness Academy. We also have Madam Alice Kemunto, who is the Consumer Grassroots Association representative. And she's very important here because these are the consumers that we need to create awareness to. Do they know what food loss and food waste is? We also have Dr. Lusike Wasilo from Kenya Agricultural Livestock Research Organization. And last but not least, we have Mr. Jacob Ochieng, thematic lead at Practical Action. And to all our panelists, welcome. We have a 20-minute session for this panel discussion. And our main question to each panelist would be, what can stakeholders do to address food loss and waste effectively? I'd like to kick off that conversation with Madam Alice Kemunto from the Consumer Grassroots Association, representing consumers. Madam Alice Kemunto, what can consumers do to really understand how to effectively address food loss and waste? Madam Alice Kemunto. I believe she might be having a few issues with her audio. I'd like then to move it to Mr. Ricky Aguda, the CEO of Society of Crop Agribusiness Advisors. Ricky
Brenda,
Aguda,
I'm available.
Alice, you're available, great.
Yes.
Tell us, yes, thank you so much for joining us. So do consumers understand what food loss and waste is, and what can we do as consumers to effectively address food loss and waste?
All right, Brenda, thank you so much for this opportunity to share the platform with able members of the society and in this sector specifically. My name is Alice Kemto, Director, Consumer Grassroots Association. And I'm going to point out the role of consumers in reducing food waste. But the question is, do consumers really know what food waste and food loss is? If you go by the small research that we've done using our networks, we've realized that consumers don't know what food loss and food waste is. But then we have a role as consumer lobby groups, a consumer to sensitize consumers on food loss and food waste, so that we can also achieve the SDGs as they are. So do they know? They don't know. And what can we do as consumer organizations to ensure that consumers understand what they should do? First of all, before you tell them what they should do, you have to bring to the attention of consumers the reason why they should work hard. They should ensure that there's little food waste at the value chain. And you remember that consumers are a very key stakeholder, because when we talk to farmers, when we talk about farmers, whatever they produce, they have in mind that there's a consumer that is going to buy this product. So these are very important stakeholders in the value chain, and they need to understand the reason why they should reduce waste. And going by, I'm not going really to talk about food waste along the value chain. I'm only talking about the tail end, and this is the consumer. We need consumers to understand that if we reduce the food waste, we will alleviate poverty at the community level, and will also ensure that the families are fed. We will reduce the methane that is being produced, the methane emissions that cause climate change. We will be able to conserve our environment. And also, we have an issue in Kenya that mostly we are clearing forests for us to produce vegetables, to produce food for consumption. But if we are able to reduce food waste, then it means that even our resources will be conserved. Having understood that, when we tell them that as consumer organizations also, especially Consumer Grassroots Association, we are in touch with the consumer at the grassroots level. We try as much as possible using our networks to make them understand that whenever they are making choices, when they are buying food, it's important to ensure that they buy what they really need, and also they use what they have. You know, it's not bad to use food that has remained. You have to reuse it in order to avoid food waste, and also share the surplus food that you have with others. And when we are training them, because we usually have consumer trainings at the grassroots. Before COVID-19, we used to have physical meetings at the town halls, and we emphasized on reusing, reducing, reusing, reduce, and also refusing if you really don't need. And at the end of it, we recycle what we have. So it's always important for them to understand that if they can be able to conserve the little they have, they can also be able to save some money on their side. And this will help them to go a long way. But then, Brenda, and also other panelists, we are also facing challenges as consumer lobby groups to ensure that this information reaches the grassroots. But as grassroots, we have tried to have some interventions, Consumer Grassroots Association, to have some interventions in order that consumers get this information. We are using the available tools that we have, like the social media, to sensitize consumers on food waste. We are using Zoom meetings like the one we are doing right now to sensitize consumers on the same. And also, lastly, we have started forming a consortium. We are collecting data of CBOs, that the community-based organizations and other groups that are working on food nutrition and food security, in order to expand our network so that in future we are able to reach a wider range of consumers. Also, I don't want to forget to let the panelists know that Consumer Grassroots Association is I think the only organization with the largest members in the country. We are now over 150,000 registered members. And the reason is we have made it free. And since we have that network, we are able to communicate to consumers where we can. But we feel that COVID-19 has limited us in a way, but we hope that when things settle down, we'll go back to our recruitment drive and get a wider network so that this information, the studies that you've done, then the research that has been done can reach down at the grassroots. You know, in Kenya, we have very good policies that are put on the shelves, but they are not, the information is not disseminated, even down at the county level. We need this information to be used by farmers, to be used by consumers, but we don't have the capacity to do it. As consumer lobby groups, you don't have the capacity, and I want to challenge the development partners that are here, and also the government to purpose to invest in consumer lobby groups so that this information that we are talking about now, it will be easily gotten down at the grassroots or down the value chain. So finally, in answering that question again, I would like also the government to look into the fragmented laws and regulations and policies that govern food policies. So food safety. We need to look, the government should come up with a way to put these policies, these laws together so that we don't give consumers hard time when it comes to these laws and regulations that have been set up to govern food safety and along the value chain. And there's also a lack of information. I've had a lot of, many of you talking about research that has been done. The only research that is available for us to use, readily available for us to use, is the one that was done in 2008, and the data that we're using was done in 2008. So we need the research organizations and also the development partners to come and help research organizations and consumer lobby groups to get the latest data that will guide us when we are going to the grassroots to educate consumers on, to be aware of food waste and food loss. And having said this, it's always good for the partners to collaborate, the stakeholders to work together. This is a collective responsibility. You cannot say that government can do it alone. Civil societies cannot do it alone. So it's a collective responsibility to ensure that we don't have this food waste and food loss along the value chain. We need to do capacity building, and we also, as I said about the policy, we need to purpose. As government, you need to purpose, and this one I'm talking to the the PS. I'm actually talking to the government here to ensure that they invest in storage facilities. Let it not be left to farmers alone. Let it be known that farmers are doing a very important, they are carrying out a very important role of which government could have done. A government that cannot be able to feed the population, that's a failed government. A government cannot be able to ensure that food that is being consumed is safe, that's a failed government. So the government should purpose to invest in storage facilities along the value chain, so that whenever we have surplus, we know where it goes. Whenever we have surplus, it can be processed. Let these things be readily available, because government has the capacity to do that. And as consumer organizations, we are ready to work closely with government to disseminate this information. We can work closely with government to ensure that these, whatever plans and programs that government is successful because of the networks that we have. I think Brenda, over and above, I've given a summary of what we can do as consumers and consumer lobby groups to ensure that consumers have information. But going back to the question, do they really know what food loss is and what food waste is? A very small fraction knows that.
Thank you so much, Alice. Indeed, you have spoken for the consumers. They need the information, they need to be empowered, and the consumer grassroots movement also need information and support from the different stakeholders to really ensure food loss and waste is a discussion that leaves the boardrooms and goes down to the grassroots. From that, I'd like to invite Kenneth. I believe Dr. Daniel Mailutha is part of this discussion, Kenya National Farmers Federation. Just following from what Alice has said, farmers are pulling their weight. Do they understand or do they know what they can do to address food loss and waste effectively? Dr. Daniel Mailutha from Kenya.
Thank you. I'm Loreen Awar.
Welcome, Loreen.
Thank you. I'm representing Dr. Mailutha for today. And because everyone has talked and everyone seems to talk and touch on farmers somehow, because seemingly we cannot live without them. And everything seems to start with them. But that said, I just want to say that as an organization, our key mandate is basically to empower farmers, build their capacity, make them aware of these things that we are talking about. Unfortunately, when we come to such platforms, we really do know what we are talking about. But then it ends here and never leaves. So what KNAF does is now try to get this information to the farmers. But what we always try to achieve is that whenever we are working with farmers, the basic thing is like the PS said that they don't want to change. But unfortunately, they do not want to change because they do not know the benefit of this change. It is something that some of us who have the knowledge know about. But if you go and tell someone that they use a cooler box, and then you don't tell them why they need to use this cooler box, then you're not doing any, you're not doing anything. It will never change. But then that said, what we always try to do when it comes to food losses, we basically work on around about 5 points. The first one is we try to tell the farmers, or to educate the farmers on how they schedule their crops. You cannot schedule a crop when it's not needed. It will mean that it won't sell. So farmers have to know how to schedule their crops. And then how do they then reduce the amount of food waste during harvest? How are you going to harvest? Yeah. All of us, maybe most of us were brought up in farming, right? And what we always do when we are farming maize is you remove you remove them and then you throw them at some point, right? And then after that, then you collect them in a bag or in a tractor and you let them go somewhere. So is it the most effective way? Maybe not. But then do they know that there might be other equipments that are available that will be, best fit and best fit for harvest? And then the other thing is, how then do they reduce the amount of food waste during storage? When you've harvested your maize, do farmers really know how much time, do you, even those who are sitting here, do you know when you will say that your maize is now dry, that it can be stored for this amount of time? What gives you the indication that your maize is now dry to that point? So we always have to tell farmers that, because unfortunately the climate has also changed to a point that when people are harvesting, it is raining. So it becomes difficult to dry your crops. So in the long run, you'll find that sometimes it has not really dried to that extent. And then you store it, then aflatoxins come in to play. So we also have to tell the farmers, how then do they reduce the amount of food waste during storage? Then the other one is, how do you recycle or dispose of your remaining food waste? And then finally, the other thing is on the government regulations. I saw someone ask a question about the ASTGs, and he or she asked it in a way that maybe because I come from the farmer's background, I know about it. You know, for me, I think that it is something that should be in the public domain. But then it means that if it is not in the public domain and people are asking about it, then people do not know about them. And these are strategies that are meant for farmers and producers, and they do not know about it. So like everyone says that we need, what is needed is more on capacity building. We cannot say that farmers do not want to change, yet they do not know what is needed. You know, they do not know why they need to change. If we are going to tell farmers that the paradigm has to shift from agriculture as a way of life to a business, you have to tell the farmers why you are voting for this. And, you know, for us, most of the time is also seeing is believing. You have to, you know, engage the farmers to know that if this is going, if what you're doing is wrong, then when you do this, this happens. And then most of the time, they have to see exactly how this benefits. Sometimes the problem becomes we get into something and we do it, and we don't always tell farmers that these things take time. Yeah. So whenever we are going to start these discussions, or whenever we are now going to take it to the farmers, we have to also tell them that this thing has to take time. Sometimes I think we farmers have gotten to a point where they know that NGOs will come in, and most of us, what we do is we take 3 years and we give a very good plan, and we have a sustainability plan. But the moment the project ends, that is it. We don't have a monitoring and evaluation system that works. So even as we talk about farmers changing, we need to know that the information is not there for the farmers to change. So it has to start with the information. They have to know what is going on. They have to know why, you know, they have to know that maybe post-harvest losses is because of, you know, these simple mistakes or these simple things that we do. So, and then basically the other thing that I want to finish with is something that the PS said, that agriculture is our backbone. We always say that agriculture is the backbone, right? But then I also believe that Kenya is a part of the Malabo Declaration, which says 10% of our overall budget should be in agriculture. Maybe the PS should tell us how much is indicated for today. It's even less than 5%. And we are talking about being part of the Malabo Declaration. So if agriculture is our backbone, then we must give it, you know, the urgency and the importance so that we move and be what we want and change, get the changes that we want. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you so much, Lorraine. Quite insightful. Farmers need information, and we have it. We are trying to bridge that gap. And with that, I would like to bring in Mr. Charles Gitau. Mr. Charles Gitau is the country director, Kenya chapter for the Africa Agribusiness Academy. We've talked a lot about technologies, capacity building, and private sector plays a very big role in this. And farmers also are part of the private sector. And Africa Agribusiness Academy, the AAA, do associate closely with different farmer groups and cooperatives within different county regions. Mr. Charles Gitau, kindly unmute yourself and tell us, what is private sector doing to address food loss and waste?
Thank you, Brenda. Basically, Africa Agribusiness Academy is an SME organization. Maybe my lights are too much. Maybe I stop the video.
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay. So Africa Agribusiness Academy is a membership organization consisting of small and medium enterprises engaged in agri-processing mainly, but also we have SMEs that are engaged in smallholder enterprises, as well as aggregation and so forth. So we are a private sector organization, and our members consist of owners of those businesses. And basically what we do, or what we have done, is that we have supported the formation of partnerships and linkages, mainly with producers, so that we can synchronize, so that they can synchronize their production systems
and therefore minimizing their need to store most of their produce. As you may realize, as SMEs, their size and proportion is quite small, and therefore they do not have a lot of resources to invest in secondary technologies such as storage. Therefore, what they do, they're driven by the desire to meet the demand of the market. So that is what drives their investment decisions. And therefore, ours is to, our members work very closely with their producers so that they have very minimum need for storage. But nevertheless, we also have seen most of our members supporting third parties in facilitating semi-processing. That is in line with what another presenter did here, that you can present that semi-processing through a third party, such as drying, storage, and packaging, and then just ask for that product when the need arises. That again minimizes the losses incurred in food industry. The other issue that comes in is that somebody mentioned most of the SMEs are really consumers. They are really consumers, though in a larger proportion. And one of the most effective ways of reducing waste by SMEs through linkages with smallholders is to reduce the number of value chain players so that processors can access their raw materials directly from the producers themselves. This means that once we promote contracting, then you know for sure that when your crop is ready, it is ready for collection by the processor. That makes it quite interesting because even at the farm level, between the farm level and the processor, there is a huge loss that was even adduced here by one of the presenters. So supporting farmers is one of the key processes that SMEs or our members do. That is in terms of production processes and technologies. And although this is not a food consumer, the East African breweries, for instance, supports its sorghum farmers quite aggressively. And this is what we try to support, that any processor should be able to link up with their smallholder farmers and effectively come up with a linkage system that supports their production system. Even now, right now, we have a potato processor, who is being supported also by SNV in making a technology, a storage technology for potatoes, so that he can just take potatoes for processing when need arises. But this means that you're supporting, I think he's supporting over 1,500 farmers through his cold storage facility. And this is what we're encouraging our SMEs to do, that they support a large number of farmers and come up with scaled up technologies. I remember when we were trying to support potato storage in some counties, we wanted to do it in a much bigger scale because the economies of scale. And we found that politics came into play because each and every ward wanted its cold storage facility in their center, and this was not economically viable. So it is important that when we are promoting, food losses, we go the economic way. We look at it in a more economic nature rather than political. And that is the best way to get out of some of these problems that we are currently facing. So finally, I think this does not happen so often in Africa, but in most other countries that we've seen is that private sector supports a lot of research, especially in areas that affect their business. and even in areas that they don't engage in directly. And therefore, we are trying to bring our SMEs together so that they can pull up resources to support either policy issues or technologies that will enhance their business in the long run. So the issue of supporting research, organizations, or even institutions, academia, in coming up with storage technologies and even production technologies that will enhance their businesses is very key to our members. And I believe this is what is going to transform our nation in terms of reducing food losses. Thank you, Brenda.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gitau. And I'd like to pick up from what you stated, that private sector's role also is in supporting research to ensure we have the technologies that we need to provide for our farmers. And with that, I'd like to invite Dr. Lusike Wasilwa, working with the Kenya Agricultural and Livestock Research Organization, to give us some insights into what is KALRO doing in regards to ensuring technologies are available to farmers. We had Professor Jane Ambuko provide some insights into what the university itself is doing in ensuring that we do have those technologies moving out to farmers. Karibu, Dr. Lusike.
Thank you very much. I'll continue on with what the previous speaker, Mr. Gitau, just said on the private sector funding research. This needs to happen in Kenya. The problem with our private sector is they think that research is funded by the government. Most of our funding is partly government, but a lot of it is donor-driven or competitively sourced. So at times we're forced to do what the donors want. But in Kenya, for us to work properly, the private sector should consider, like what we see in South Africa, funding both research and academia, because it's about generating data, statistics. You've heard about the few studies that were presented by SNV, by Dr. Ambuko. They're just a few studies. And you see the studies in terms of research are on potato, mango, tomato, banana, African indigenous vegetables, dairy, and a bit on onions. They're so scattered and they're far apart when you look at the years at when these post-harvest studies were undertaken. If we don't have the numbers or the data to be able to inform the system, then what exactly are we doing in terms of technologies? We have good technologies that have been developed. University of Nairobi, KALRO, we have developed quite a number of them, but the uptake is limited because most farmers seem to have accepted the losses they get. There was a study on banana by Africa Harvest where they said up 75% of the bananas that are produced end up in a dump. So we're losing so much. What are we producing for? Are we producing to throw or producing to consume? So then when you look at in terms of research, how many post-harvest scientists are being trained by the universities to get out there? We actually need to do a lot more because the number of post-harvest scientists are not too many. We had the post-harvest conference, there were enough papers presented, but that was a fraction in terms of the number of scientists undertaking this research. So we need more. We need to have special courses like at the diploma certificate level that focus on post-harvest losses and then recruit several interns that are champions. You had Jane Ambuko, the SNV talking about champions in post-harvest. We can now have intern champions on post-harvest, looking at the different crops, because crops alone, I'm biased towards crops. There are about 430 commercial ones in Kenya. So we need a minimum of 430 interns to address issues on post-harvest. And what these interns will be doing is just generating that data that informs policy, generating data that informs the kind of technologies that are required, generating data that informs why the uptake of some of these technologies is so low. I was in the field about 2 weeks ago, and you start seeing technologies that are being presented out there, and I say, these ones are back. Can you consider going to University of Nairobi, the Innovation Center on Post-Harvest, and see the current technologies and how they've been improved to be able, instead of us going backwards to the Stone Age, we now get to the current technology and be able to show our farmers what to use in order to reduce losses. So the issue of post-harvest losses is as foreign as about 5 years ago when people didn't know what pests and diseases were. But you know, we say thank God to fall armyworm and maybe now the locusts, that people are realizing pests and diseases do cause a lot of losses. And now there's a lot of interest in the issues of plant pathology or entomology and developing technologies in that area. So what is that game changer for post-harvest? Professor Jenna Mbuko was the one who held the first post-harvest conference in Africa, and we're hoping that she's able to spearhead the second one. We need to hammer and hammer again that we're losing too much in terms of post-harvest losses. So how do we then, what are those technologies? Low-cost technologies have been presented, but they're still not been taken up. What we need to do is establish these centers of excellence all over the country. There should be one center of excellence on post-harvest to be able to allow academia and research to demonstrate post-harvest technologies in every county so that people can know you're just losing too much. We also need more support from the government of Kenya and our development partners in this area. We need a lot, because when we're losing 30, 40, up to 60%, what are you talking about? We really need more support. We also need the university to support us in that every agriculture student must take a special unit on just post-harvest. That way they come out already equipped to be able to address that area. So it's telling them again. Then the other thing is for research, I've been trained by Professor Jenna Mbuko and Willis Owino that I talk like a post-harvest specialist, but I'm a molecular plant pathologist. But you can imagine they've been able to sensitize me, so I'm able to talk very comfortably about it. We have equipments that are even cheap. For example, what Calro is using and trying to see how we can get out is using moisture cards that just cost 100 shillings or $1 that you put in your sack. Is like a litmus paper and it's able to tell you the humidity of your grain, or using the dry card. The moisture meters are $3, the dry card is $1. So that's 100 to 300 shillings. And you're able to know your humidity, because a lot of losses in the grains is because the grains are not dried well enough. If you dry them well enough, and the farmer can afford 100 shillings, so they can know that their grain is dry. If it's too dry, then the insects will not be able to eat, because they need moisture to be able to eat, and your losses will be reduced. So there are simple technologies of that. The other technologies is how we use, like for the grains, pesticides in controlling weevils or another storage pest. Instead of putting it on the bag, we put it in the bag, which is wrong, because now we're eating all of these pesticides. So it's all about sensitization. The technologies are there, but there's not enough extension to go out there to capacity build and to sensitize people in terms of what they need to do to minimize the post-harvest losses. So awareness creation is major. We also have now in Calro, in terms of research, where we're also working closely with the University of Nairobi, this use of dehydrate trays, which are simple trays that can dry a vegetable within 15 to 30 minutes. The only problem now is the cost of these technologies. And we're trying to see how to then jointly work together to reduce the cost. Good technologies, but the intellectual property is a bit too expensive. And this is where we need support from the government to really make these technologies more affordable, and also really make sure that we get them out there. Because if we've been able to create an extension system using plant-wise or plant doctors to minimize losses or be able to diagnose losses caused by pests and diseases, then where is the plant-wise for post-harvest technologies? What do we need to do in Kenya? I know you told me to answer, but I'm asking questions. What do we need to do? We have the private sector here. How do they come in terms of ensuring that farmers don't just accept the losses they see? I'll stop there because of time. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Lusike. Indeed, it's good to still ask questions, even in situations where questions have been thrown to you. And we need to indeed ask ourselves, what can we also do to support the current technologies that are available, the initiatives that are being done across the country to address food loss and waste. I'd like to invite Mr. Jacob Ochieng from Practical Action. Just piggybacking from what Dr. Lusike has said, and all the previous speakers that support is needed and all stakeholders within the value chain need to come together to address food loss and waste. And practical action represents some of the development partners working within this space. Mr. Jacob Ochieng, kindly tell us what is practical action doing to support stakeholders in the value chain to address food loss and waste.
Thank you, and hello to all the participants. It is something that really is unfortunate that food loss and waste is as predictable as we have always known it to be. And practical action really takes this into cognizance, and we are really putting our best to ensure that food security is achieved as we also want to work on food loss and waste. So looking at it, you realize that we all agree that we will not be in a position to look at meaningful, interventions that curb food loss and waste if we don't address issue of security and also address the environmental objectives that accompany it. And what we have been able to do as practical action, we work with thousands of smallholder farmers to support thriving agribusinesses to ensure that there is food security and also to have income. But food loss and waste is a concern to us. And what is it that we have been able to do in this space? Now, we are very, very good knowledge brokers. And today I am very happy to listen to the raft of technologies that can be deployed at local context to ensure that smallholder farmers are supported to meaningfully reduce on food waste and food loss. And previously, practical action has been able to deploy technologies, support smallholder farmer systems, particularly those that handle post-harvest technologies and issues, particularly when it comes to immediate post-harvest processing, like drying of vegetables and fruits. And of course, we realize that all these technologies could be out there. But the challenge which we see also in this space is that we are not piloting as sufficiently as we should be able to pilot. It is one thing for us to come out and say that we have one or two technologies, but it is important that we realize that contexts, particularly among smallholder farming systems, differ in terms of the needs. We also need technologies that are gender transformative. We need to look at barriers that still curtail the reach to scale of these technologies. And we as practical action, we have been able to occupy that space. We also really put our best foot forward to support participatory research. Because when we look at these technologies, it is possible that some of them would appear successful, but if you don't understand some of the system issues like social cultural issues that can be able to inhibit technology uptake. I know we talk about really looking at everything from the economic perspective, but as practical action, we really support developers of technologies to just help them understand to what extent technology can be taken up. So this is something that we continue to do, and I think we will continue to invite partnerships. I was glad to just see the kind of technologies the University of Nairobi is having there, and also the others that have been mentioned here. So we will continue to ensure that really reaches out to the smallholder farmers. But again, the other thing which we really emphasize is how to effectively rethink how we communicate the need to control post-harvest losses to farmers. And one of the things we are trying to do of late is to ensure that post-harvest economics is part of business plans that farmers are putting together. Because there must be a way in which we need to be innovative about communicating post-harvest technology to farmers. It is one thing to tell farmers that this is important, but it is another thing to make them really connect with the kind of communication that we pass over to them. So we are supporting the development of tools, and we are getting support, by a number of actors and donors, like the Care Foundation, really supporting us to ensure that we advance agroecology technologies to farmers that can be able to support, this kind of post-harvest loss and waste. Now, the other thing which we are doing is to ensure that we support the general planning around how we work with the food systems, particularly concerning the issues of climate change. The other day, the Kenya Meteorological Department released a report on the state of, climate change in Kenya. And one of the highlights of that report indicated that our traditional bread baskets are becoming wetter and wetter over time. And what that means in practice is that if we are going to get worried about aflatoxin incidences, then that is only able to escalate with future climates. So practical action has been able to work with early warning systems, applying them to resilience in different contexts. And this is something that we anticipate that we can be able to do here. But the most important thing here is also be able to translate those advisories to the local context of the farmers so that they are able to look at that. Now, it is also important as we look into knowledge brokering and ensuring that technologies go to scale, and try to align that with the enabling environment. At practical action, we really look into supporting the uptake of renewable technologies, but sometimes there is a challenge with the enabling environment. For example, looking into this year, you realize the government lifted the ban on tax, the zero rating of renewable energy products, and that could, in a way, draw back the gains that have been made, particularly if you look at technologies that are solar powered. And this is something that we seek to engage, government, of course, getting support by a cross-section of actors to ensure that we don't really, that we really support smallholder farmers at the level where they could be able to make gains. So I think we had some milestones to that extent, but again, some policy shifts by government become a challenge in that respect. Now, last but not least, the other thing which we really would want to support, and we have supported, is to really ensure that we translate strategies into practice. The peers talked about the agriculture, transformation and growth strategy. But the reality of the matter is that because county governments are mandated to undertake extension services, there is always almost a perpetual disconnect between what the strategy says at the national front and what in practice is tangibly registered on the ground. And practical action occupies now that space to ensure that whatever provisions are there, we are able to really think in terms of making it progressive and translatable on the ground so that it is really meaningful to the smallholder farmers. So after all is said and done, I think we need to also think around how we collapse all interest of all actors along commodity value chains into a win-win policy framework. Because food loss and waste is more complex than we think. If, for example, we curtail food loss at the lower levels of the value chain, there definitely will be a ripple effect, either midway of the value chain or at the tail end of the value chain. And as we think in terms of getting progressive policies and strategies to translate these beautiful strategies into tenable profits for the value chains, then we have to really think in terms of how we bring different interests together so that we can support a more progressive, all-inclusive, policy moving forward. Otherwise, I would want to just summarize by saying that as practical action, we have over time looked at the interventions that can get into these, remedies that are being suggested. But data is very critical here. We sort of probably have made some milestones in certain value chains that matter in terms of trying to locate where loss and waste occur. But there is always the question of how do we entice everybody to curb, food loss and waste? Because if, for example, we know that smallholder farmers would probably be worried about loss that probably can drive them into food poverty or lack of income. That is something that's entirely different from a reason that a consumer may have, and that's entirely different from a reason that an agro-processor may have. So as practical action, because we work across markets and we want to really address, and we have attempted to address, market inclusion across the entire, commodity chain, data is something that really becomes, the loose part of the chain where the ball is falling. And it is almost impracticable, to be able to mount very effective remedies if we don't have, effective data. And this is something that actually goes back to academia. Not to say that we are divorcing ourselves from the process, but we are part of, the participatory research system. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jacob, for those insights. And very interesting to see what practical action is doing in the space of food loss and waste. Last but not least, I'd like to invite Mr. Ricky Aguda. He's the CEO of the Society of Crop Agribusiness Advisors. Please, Ricky, give us some insights into what the civil society is doing to address food loss and waste. Yeah, Ricky, go ahead.
Sorry, thanks, Brenda, and good evening, everyone. Indeed, it's been a very interesting discussion and very good insights from all the presenters and panelists so far. I will try and be brief just to try and wrap up in terms of the civil society role. And really, as my colleague Mary Njuguna pointed out right at the beginning, there is a need for a multi-sectoral approach in trying to resolve some of these complex challenges, such as the challenges around food loss and waste reduction. And when the different actors work in silos, then our efforts are diluted. So civil society is actually key to bringing all the actors together and trying through a process of dialogue to really have some collective responsibility and collective action. In the recent past on this particular agenda, and I refer back to what Professor Ambuko mentioned with the post-harvest conference, the first one that was organized about 2 years ago, and even leading up until today, the efforts have really been around onboarding efforts that stem from the SDGs and then are cascaded down to the continental level through the CADAP program, where we have the biannual review mechanism, and we have specific targets that have been set for us to achieve in agriculture, with targets on aspects of post-harvest loss reduction reflecting in the last 1 year. Now those efforts then must be reflected in the national space, and indeed with agriculture being devolved, it was only logical that counties needed to reflect their planning and their programming on issues of food loss and waste reduction by, first of all, domesticating some of those initiatives within their county integrated development plans, and then, of course, trying to organize or assign budgets to programs that would address interventions at the ground. So our role as civil society has been to try and facilitate some of these discussions, to increase partnerships through a multi-sectoral partnership approach, so that we are not working in silos. I think that is the most critical aspect in terms of trying to resolve the food loss and waste reduction issues. And as all the presenters and speakers before have highlighted, some of the challenges have had to do with the absence of data. So, of course, in partnership with credible research organizations such as the International Food Policy Research Institute, we were able to see some tools that would help with mapping the food loss scenarios. We have the IFPRI e-Atlas tool that was developed in this collaboration. And these are tools that have now been availed to different actors to then look at what they're doing and see how they can improve, in terms of overcoming inefficiencies in the value chains. You've heard from Charles Gitau at AAA, and really linked to what Dr. Lusike mentioned on the need to improve the linkage at the research level between private sector and the research organization, because if the research answers to what the needs and gaps in private sector are, then we would see better results and we'll be able to improve the efficiencies, as Charles said, in terms of reducing those primary losses. Additional to that, as Professor Borga mentioned in his initial remarks, there is a need for all of us to really adopt and work in tandem with the national strategy. So the ASTGS is our current strategy for the agriculture sector, and it is important for civil society to again partner with others in this space, be it the consumer groups or the private sector or research and other interested parties, to make the SDGs a common tool, a commonly understood tool. So through awareness raising and using the social media platforms, I'm happy to say that we've been able to engage a diverse audience and trying to just make this particular strategy more understandable. Of course, it comes with the issues of standards, and we know that as we work to reduce food loss and reduce food waste, we must also enhance the capacity of all value chain actors to adopt standards, so that at the end of the day, whatever we produce and we get to market is able to compete, not just in our domestic markets, but also in regional and international markets. So that has a lot to do with capacity building, but more, as I said initially, increasing the levels of partnership so that we do not work in silos and we have the necessary standards adopted from the grassroots through the county mechanisms, all the way through to the national platforms where issues of food and nutrition security are examined and tackled. So I think with those few remarks, Brenda, what I'll do is just close by saying, I think what is really critical is for all the actors to work in partnership and to focus on data-focused results. We've got targets all the way from the SDG to the STGS, and we can work against those targets and have some mechanism for coordinating and reporting those results that will then help us to measure how we're moving, even as we seek to tackle food loss and waste reduction. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ricky, for those remarks. And indeed, you have summarized adequately what we have been discussing this afternoon. With that, this brings us to a close of this very important discussion. And I'd like to encourage everyone to continue the discussion on Twitter and Facebook with the hashtag FLW. I'd like to invite Mary Njuguna to give us the closing remarks so that we can officially end this webinar. Welcome, Mary.
Thank you, Brenda. Thanks, participants, for creating time to join us on this webinar. Definitely is a very important agenda on post-harvest loss. I always get the impression that maybe because for many years in this part of the world, we have been very, food insecure. We've tended to focus our efforts on production. It's becoming quite clear that if we do not focus on post-harvest loss, then the gains that we are making in enhanced production and doesn't give us the results that we require. So from the presentations today, clearly our task is well cut out for us. There is a lot that still needs to be done. Looking at what Ricky has highlighted, the global targets, whether it's the SDGs or the Africa Union the targets, there's still a lot for us to do. It requires concerted efforts, and therefore I think we need to continue this conversation. First of all, each one of us meeting our mandates, targeting all the key actors that are important. Let us empower farmer organizations, the producer organizations, with the information and the knowledge that we have gathered implementing these kind of projects. The role of research is extremely important as shared. They have knowledge, they have the innovations, and we would want to encourage them to bring out these innovations to the various players within the supply chains. Again, the role of civil society, dialoguing, bringing out the conversation, putting this conversation on the table cannot be gainsaying. It's extremely important. We need them to continue putting up the movements of the smallholder farmers to bring attention to the challenges they're experiencing. And of great importance is the role of the government, especially in providing the policy and regulation frameworks, and especially at county level, ensuring that we have substantial allocation or budget allocation to agriculture, and in particular, infrastructure development to support post-harvest management technology. So that's very important. And of course, private sector. We need private sector to play their role and to introduce their solutions so that smallholder farmers and other value chain actors can be able to adopt these technologies. And most importantly, really focusing at investing in value addition to support the agenda. So with those few remarks, I really would want to appreciate everybody for creating time to be here. Special thanks to the Principal Secretary. He had to leave because of other commitments. We really appreciate that he's put this on his agenda. So we'll continue to engage him on it. The various speakers, Professor Mbuko, University of Nairobi, for really carrying this agenda, not only here in Kenya, but also at the African Union level. FAO, really continuing to give us to help us with the research work that you're doing. It's very valuable. We've utilized your work in our respective activities. All the panelists that shared their respective organizations' experiences, you guys are doing a good job. Continue the good work. And finally, let me thank my colleagues at SNB, the Voice for Change Partnership here in Kenya, SOCA, Brenda, University of Nairobi, Ministry of Agriculture, for hosting this event. So with those few remarks, let's keep the agenda going. Thank you very much for attending, and goodbye. Back to you, Brenda.
Yeah, thank you, Mary. I think you've closed it for us quite well. So goodbye, and continue to remember that stop food loss, stop food waste, and champion consumer awareness within your different networks. Thank you very much.
Thank you and goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Goodbye. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye, Brenda. Bye, Roy.